He is right. Dave Smith is right. I know this might come as a surprise because people were losing their shit about my previous Dave Smith video, but he's right about everything, minus maybe 2.5 points. The third one, I don't think it's so much about being right or wrong, it's more like perspective. But realistically, in my opinion, he's wrong about two things. If you didn't watch this, I recommend you watch this. Obviously, I'm not gonna get this many views, so hopefully whoever's watching this watched this before. I can easily say, aside from these 2 points, I 100% agree with him. Pretty much everything. Douglas Murray doing personal attacks on the New York, using the New York Post, childish. Douglas Murray saying that the only condition for him to come onto the Joe Rogan podcast is if he debates Dave Smith. Sounds like, I don't know, kind of bitch behavior. Like, you agreed. I mean, it is what it is. Right? That sounds like bitch behavior. Complaining about it after the fact. Douglas Murray, still appealing to authority. Yes, wrong. Strawman arguments. Yes, wrong. There's a reason these are like fallacies. Fallacies? Holy shit, man. Fallacies. A fallacy. Fallacies. There we go. Okay. There's a reason these are fallacies, okay? Well, Jesus. Why could I say that? And his brain is cooked. We had a good meal. Yes, there's a reason these are argumentational fallacies, okay? That being said, 2 points, and third one is more like perspective and context rather than, well, mostly perspective, rather than like agreeing or disagreeing about something that he talks about, which is like the downplaying of history. But anyways, let's get into it. So let me make a statement here, okay? If you're a Dave Smith supporter, you agree with everything he says, you might as well leave now. Okay? Because I'm not gonna agree with him from this point on. I already agreed with everything else. Everything else he says here, I agreed. Okay? So when I agreed with him on those things, Murray supporters left the building. Now I guess it's your turn. But if you're like a normal individual who just wants to have a perspective, a conversation about this in the comment later on, stick around. Make a comment. I don't care how long it is. We'll talk. If you don't agree with me, I'm totally fine with that. But if you gonna do personal attacks because I don't agree with Dave Smith, bro, I'm gonna be trolling you. I don't give a fuck. It's like, thanks for the engagement beforehand. Anyways, let's get into it.
That's a little bit like, you could understand where when someone like me is not advocating a policy that's going to result in children dying, and you are advocating a policy that will result in children dying, even if you're going to argue that this policy is still necessary, you could understand where someone would be a little more uneasy about having you go unchallenged. So for example, here's an issue that me and Douglas probably both agree on. I support mass deportations. Okay.
He supports mass deportations. His problem with the Israeli policies is that it would create a lot of, civilians and especially children dying. Okay, mass deportations, maybe not to the same extent, will cause probably children, maybe not necessarily dying, suffering. I'm fairly certain there would be a lot of like criminal activity revolving children during mass deportation. The difference here is the scale. The principle is very, very similar. Okay, this is a policy that will impede on humans like living conditions. Okay, why is it that you are for mass deportation, but you are not for Israel preventing further attacks on it by a terrorist organization? Why? Why is that? because this has more to do with you and like the country you live in, whereas the other one is like, oh well, I'm not as involved, so I can have a more neutral stance. But like, let's be real, Dave doesn't have a neutral stance. He has a biased stance, which is fine. He's allowed for his opinion. It sucks that kids are dying. It sucks that women and children and all the civilians that are dying. It sucks. I have yet to hear any resemblance of a solution to this problem that is better than Hamas needs to surrender, okay, and release all the hostages and be dissolved. I haven't yet heard a better solution than this. You can say it's like, well, Hamas is just, protecting its people. Let's be real. If you think that, you're full of shit. Okay, Hamas is not protecting its people. It's actively using its people as like human shields. Okay, yeah, but that is the definition of what they're doing. I mean, that is what Hamas is doing. It's like, well, do you expect like Israel, like let's say like, everyone combined and they went to Israel and expected them to dissolve the IDF? If everyone combined and the two options you had as Israel is either total annihilation, okay, continuation of the war, total annihilation, or to dissolve your military and give up your ability to defend yourself, well, let's see. Technically, they will both result in the same thing, but one has more chance of survival. Okay? Like, giving up your military, if the whole world is attacking you, now you can do a last hurrah, for sure. But, like, I'm just talking about, logically speaking, if you give up your military, you will be left alone, whatever. Isn't that exactly what Japan did? This is literally the situation that what Japan did. They were met with a set of rules after World War II. You are not allowed to have, like, any navy and all that stuff. I don't remember all the other limitations on them. Right? And like your military protection will come at the expense of the US, right? That was basically the agreement, something like that, right? I don't know the details, it doesn't matter. You get the principle. Okay? So that is literally what Israel is proposing to Gaza. Dissolve your terrorist military. Okay? Dissolve it, dissolve the organization. Okay? Bring the criminals who raped, abused, and all this stuff to justice, which honestly, I don't even know if that is like a mandatory in this case, because it's a much grander picture than just like, not to downplay it, but, a few hundred abuses versus the survival of two nations. No offense. There's no real comparison here. Okay? Either way, dissolving Hamas and releasing all the hostages, or we continue this war, which you have absolutely no chance of winning, and we will destroy you. I'm sorry, if you are picking your destruction, that is on you. I am not gonna blame Israel for wanting to defend its future, because if they stop this war and let Hamas reorganize and make more preparation and then cause another October 7 or whatever, and like keep throwing missiles, then what was the point of this war? Then you might as well just be like, you know what? Fuck it, take Israel. Fuck it, like, here you go. It's like that. Like, what do you want them to do? These people, Hamas, and the people who voted for them, because I know it's not everyone who lives there voted for them, and the people who voted for them, ever since 2008, essentially 100,000 rockets into Israel. What do you want Israel to do? Give up the land? Why? Why would they do that? They are the superior force in this area. Why would they do it? Because they're good people? Okay, so let me get this straight. Let's say you live in a house, right? Let's say your grandfather, right? Because this is Darwin. Let's say your grandfather tricked somebody into, or like forced somebody. And I'm not saying this is the case with Israel, right? I'm just trying to equate your belief. I'm not saying that is what happened. I'm trying to use your logic. Okay? The ones who think that Israel should like give up its territory. Your grandfather, great-grandfather, whatever, scammed somebody else, right? Scammed the Smiths. Okay? He scammed them into signing off their property away to him. Okay? Now your great-grandfather is already dead, and now you live there with your family and you're really happy, and some dude comes and it's like, hey man, I'm a descendant of the Smiths. I have proof that your great-grandfather scammed my great-grandfather, and that's not right, so I expect you to evacuate, tomorrow, and I'm gonna be living here. Are you gonna leave? Are you gonna leave? No, fuck that. Are you kidding me? Like, yeah, you're gonna like take up your family, your kids, your wives. Like, hey, listen, guys. Yeah, I'm sorry, but like a few generations ago, my great grandfather scammed this guy. So it's like, I guess we can't live here anymore. Yeah, fuck it, dude. That's not never gonna happen. You have the right for this property at this point. It doesn't matter what happened before. Like, whatever. Like. If this guy can't forcibly evict you using authority, using his own force, whatever. Let's say there's no government. It's just you and this guy. If he can't forcibly move you from there, why would you move willingly? It makes no sense. Absolutely makes no sense for you to willingly cause so much harm to you yourself and your family at the expense of a stranger who has some claim from 3 generations ago. Why would you do that? Because it's just. Justice will not keep your kids safe and fed and give them shelter. There's a limit to how much justice can do. Justice is nice when you live in a society where there's structure and all that stuff. Then justice is nice. And even then, not everything is just in those society, but at least you have a semblance of justice. This guy killed this guy, so we're gonna imprison him for 25 years, right? Personally, if somebody killed a family member of mine or like a good friend of mine, yeah, I don't know if that I want that guy to be in prison or if I want to be shackled in a basement where I can beat the fuck out of him until he dies. I don't know which one. Like, I'll have to, like, in that moment, I'll have to decide what is justice. Okay, for society, I can understand there's more justice in a structure. Me personally, I don't know if I would feel justice, right? Alright, so that's this argument. Okay, but you get my point. Okay. Anyways, next.
Okay, have you been there? If I had gone on Rogan's podcast and held myself out as an expert in MMA fighting, I suspect he would have noticed. If I had kept making mistake after mistake and showing ignorance piled...
Key concept in what he's saying here. Mistake after mistake means you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You just keep making mistakes on the subject.
Upon ignorance, I think he'd say, hey, you don't seem to be very knowledgeable about this. And he'd be right. So why is it hard to grasp that something similar applies in other areas? Douglas, nobody doesn't grasp your point.
Actually, everybody doesn't grasp this point. I would say vast majority of people didn't grasp this point because you are equating that to him making an appeal to authority, which in a sense, you're not completely wrong. The issue here is if you're trying to have, let's say you want to have, again, using the MMA example, if you want to have a serious conversation, not just like talking with friends. Like, I don't know a lot about MMA. I hang out with my friends. We talk about some stuff during an MMA fight. We talk about like the fights, like, oh shit, that was a nice punch. Oh man, that rocked him. We talk about that stuff. That is not a serious conversation about the topic. This is not like, we're not talking technicalities. We're not talking like rules. We're like none of that. We're just watching it as entertainment. It's like me watching soccer, not knowing the rules, right? And I consider it like 20 guys chasing after a ball, 2 guys trying to stop it, and 2 guys chasing after 20 players, okay? That's soccer for me, okay, for the most part, right? Do I know the rules? Yes, I used to play soccer, but like, that's what it looks like to me watching soccer. I don't care about it. It's not interesting to me. So if I have somebody who's like, I don't know, a super soccer enthusiast, right? Like, he knows all the names of all the people and all that stuff, and he wants to have a serious conversation with me about soccer. Do you think that conversation is possible? We are not on the same knowledge level, not even close. There is some like thresholds you need to cross to have a proper conversation about specific topics. Dave wants to talk about morality of war, while Murray is talking about the necessity of it. These are two different concepts which don't really like have anything to do with each other outside of like thinking about war as a whole. But like one is talking about the necessity of this war, why this war needs to happen, and the other one is saying it's like, well, look at all the bad things that happen during war. Cool. That has nothing to do with what needs to be done. Anyways, let's go. Keep going.
We all grasp it. Like, it's unbelievable how pompous this guy is. He's making the simplest point. It's a non-argument, but it's fine if you just want to make this point. Mm-hmm. Everybody grasps it. Nobody does.
Again, not everybody grasps it for some reason. People were saying I was making an appeal to authority in my previous video where I was trying to be as clear as possible. I don't care about appeal to authority. I'm caring about some standard of knowledge of your own research. Not, I heard this professional guy speak about it and then not checking why he said these things. If you don't know why he reached a conclusion, like let's say you are taking information from somebody else, right? It's like, oh, I agree with this opinion. He's right. But you didn't do your own due diligence to see how he got to this conclusion. And you are just copy pasting his opinion without understanding how he got to it. Then I'm sorry, you didn't do your own research. You didn't do anything. You are just an NPC repeating talking points that your bias already agreed with. That is not an argument. And then you want to debate, which, by the way, let's be real, on Joe Rogan, that was not debate. Okay? Murray completely avoided debate. Again, Murray fucked up. That's literally the title of my previous video. Murray fucked up. Dave is still clueless, though. Anyways, you want to debate somebody. You didn't do any due diligence, right? You did your own thinking based on conclusions and came to your own opinions that have no, that maybe some of them are true, sure, because like imagination is a crazy thing, right? Logic is a crazy thing. If you think about 10 possibilities, one of them might be right. Doesn't mean that, oh, you guessed one, so you know what you're talking about. Okay. You talking to Murray on a serious subject in a serious debate when he is of a certain level of knowledge about this and you're at a different level, you can view it as an appeal to authority. Sure, you can. I understand that argument. But you also cannot see how this would be a serious debate. And again, yes, Murray fucked up. He didn't even debate. He didn't even prove that he has the knowledge, okay? All he did was, oh, I was there. Oh, I know what I'm talking about. Oh, I did my research. But he didn't prove any of it. Yes, you are correct. But it's also not his job. Well, I guess in the debate, it is his job to correct him, to argue points. But again, the whole Joe Rogan thing was fucked up. There was no debate. So it's like he was avoiding the debate. I don't know what the whole point was of him even being there, agreeing to debate Dave Smith. I don't know. He fucked up. Like, I don't know what to say. He fucked up. But that also still doesn't mean that they're on the same level of expertise. The whole point is, if you want to have a debate with someone, right, you have to have some semblance of like a similar category. Okay, you don't go into an MMA fight while you weigh 140 fighting a 190 guy. Okay, you can't. It's different categories of weight. Same with the debates. You can't just be clueless and debate a serious topic. You can talk about it and chat about it. That's fine. Like, just have fun with it. Talk about the subject. Chill with your friends and talk about whatever. You can do that. No one's saying you can't. You can even talk to an expert. But you can't talk to an expert not knowing anything, saying one thing, and when the expert is telling you another thing, you just disregard everything he says. Because it's like, imagine you're a student talking to a teacher, and I'm not saying Dave is the student, Murray's the teacher, but in terms of knowledge, right? In terms of the knowledge of the situation, and again, I'm not saying Murray knows everything, but that is the that is what he makes it seem to be in this relation. Okay, in this conversation, he seems to say that he's up here on this conversation, you are down here, therefore we can't have a proper discussion about this because you don't know what you're talking about. We can have a chat about it, we can't debate about it, right? That's how I view it. And again, Murray fucked up. Yes, he used weird language to even say that. Okay, but he basically says that it's like, how am I talking to you like when you don't know anything, right? It's like you can, and it is again, he doesn't say you can't talk about anything. It's that, why are you talking about this with me in a serious conversation when you are lacking so much of the information? Imagine coming to a debate with like 3 sheets of paper of information, talk about research, like fucking quotations and all of that, fuck it, 30 pages, okay, of information, and the other guy comes with nothing, and he's just throwing information at you off the top of his head, right? And you're like, well, actually, that is incorrect, and it's like, no, that is correct. This guy said it. He's a general. I believe him. Like, how can you have a conversation with this? Now, I understand debates in modern day is to convince the audience, not the person you're talking to. But if you actually come to a debate, I actually want to talk to the person as well. I don't like trying to convince the audience. I want to try and convince this one. I want to have my mind change if I'm wrong, and I want to change your mind if you're wrong. I don't like the tribalism of debates in current modern era. If you have a good point and you think I'm wrong, bro, tell me what you think I'm wrong about. We're gonna discuss this. I will explain to you why I think I'm right. You can explain to me why you think you're right, and we can come to a conclusion if I agree with your like logical steps that got you to this conclusion or not, or if I see something in your logical steps, if I see anything that I like, oh wait, but this doesn't seem right, and because this doesn't seem right, everything else starts to kind of fall apart. And then we can talk about like the intricacies of like how you got to this position that you're in, but you can't do it with Dave because he doesn't have the steps. He took conclusions from videos, then he made up his own mind, and then he either reasoned some stuff or searched for stuff that would enforce his view. He didn't start from like zero and then learn. He started from, this is the fact. Okay, let me like try and figure out how it come to this, but obviously I'm going to be skipping some steps because there's like probably like a whole pyramid of ideas of how it would come to this, but the whole pyramid is actually a lie, and there's only like one pillar that is holding the whole pyramid together. Okay, and that doesn't mean that Dave found the pillar. Okay, I don't like. Does that make sense?
Doesn't. And it's funny that you use this example. Again, you have to hide behind this idea of if I had gone on Rogan's podcast and held myself out as an expert. But that's not what anybody's doing. And actually, it's interesting you bring up the MMA example, because I've spent a fair amount of time on Rogan's podcast talking about MMA. And like, again,
this is another point. This is technically part of the same point where I don't agree with him because he's missing the point he's making, right? It's like, yeah, you talk to Rogan about MMA. Okay.
Look, the John Anik, who's he's the UFC like lead commentator. He's the what do they call it again? Not the color commentator. That's more Joe Rogan and Daniel Cormier and some of those other guys. But he's like the lead broadcaster. Like, he's never fought.
Great.
He's never fought in MMA.
Fantastic.
But he studies it.
But he fucking studies it. That is the point, though. Okay, now imagine that what he was studying was a book written by a 5-year-old about his idea of what fights should be like, and they have superpowers in them. Do you think he would still have his job as a commentator in the MMA? Or if he studied the appropriate stuff because he's actually interested and he wants to know more about it, that makes him what it is. The argument here is not that you didn't study or you don't know what you're talking about. Well, sorry. it's not that you didn't study, is that what you studied is wrong, basically. Like, what you think about the situation, you don't have any actual knowledge about it. You don't have to go there. But you can't just read one side of it and come to a conclusion based on one side. It's like somebody who just watches CNN or somebody who just watches Fox thinks the other side is a complete lunatic. Okay? Now, there are lunatics on both sides, sure, but if you just watch one side, you think that the other side is just that. Why? Because you're fucking tunnel visioned. And Dave is tunnel visioned. By the way, I think Douglas Murray is also, to an extent, tunnel vision. I didn't hear Murray say a lot of bad things about Israel. There are plenty of things you can say that are bad. But I think you can't say that in the modern age. He can't. I mean, he probably is in a more lenient position to say something because he's not as much of a symbol for a movement as Murray is as a symbol for the movement pro-Israel. Okay, Murray is a much more pro-Israeli symbol than Dave is a pro-Palestine symbol. Okay? He's just a pro-Palestine kind of good dude. And honestly, he's not even pro-Palestine because pro-Palestine people probably don't even like him because he says, Hamas are a terrorist group. He agrees on the most common sense stuff. But he's not a pillar when he says all he says really is that the morality of war is bad. Yes, thank you. Okay. Now back to solutions. Okay. And again, to the whole MMA point, right? If the guy is not studying the right things for MMA, he cannot have a professional job in that field. Because he won't know what to say or everything. If he again, the whole back to the point where what Murray said, if you're wrong and you're wrong and you're wrong and you're wrong all the time, whatever you say about the subject, you're always wrong. Why would I have a serious conversation with you? You clearly don't know what you're talking about. Why would Joe Rogan talk to, a monkey about MMA? A monkey doesn't even know what MMA is. Right? That is there has to be some standard of knowledge between the two parties to talk about something. And technically, when I say that, it does sound like appeal to authority. And I understand that, but you can't have a conversation with a monkey. I'm not saying Dave is a monkey, whatever. I'm just using a more hyperbolic version of this, right? I can't talk, calculus to a monkey. I can't have a serious debate with a monkey about, fucking kinesiology, about MMA tactics, about jiu-jitsu. I can't have a conversation with him. Why? He doesn't, because it's a fucking monkey. Okay? Dave, and again, MMA is a pretty easy subject to talk to. If you have any interest in fitness, if you have any interest in just physiology, kinesiology, anatomy, if you have any interest in, just fighting as a whole, if you have any interest in fucking even the Roman Empire, if you have any interest in gladiators, you have a lot of things to talk about within the MMA sphere. Okay? It's not a complicated subject to find something to talk about. If you have an interest in psychology and psychology of battle, you can talk about MMA. But you can't have a serious discussion about a specific aspect of the topic if you have no knowledge about it. Just because I know some stuff about MMA, some stuff about physiology and kinesiology, and I used to be a trainer, so I understand conditioning and all that stuff. Just because I have the information about that. If you ask me a specific question, this is a serious conversation right now about jiu-jitsu, and I don't know anything about jiu-jitsu. Now, in this case, I do, to an extent, not a lot, but I do know some jiu-jitsu, the concept of it. You cannot have a serious conversation with me. You can't. You're a teacher and I'm a student at this point. Because you actually know what you're talking about, and I just can ask questions to familiarize myself with the topic. So if you think that kind of relation is an appeal to authority, then I'm sorry, but you can't. I don't know how to agree with you. You cannot have people who are extremely unknowledgeable about a situation talking seriously with somebody who is extremely knowledgeable about the situation. It just makes no sense. it becomes a teacher-student thing. Because, like I started saying, imagine you're a student, you go to a class to learn something you have never learned before, and everything the teacher says, it's like, actually, I disagree with you, and you give him some bullshit reason, and he disproves you, and you're like, you know what? Okay. And then he says the next thing, it's like, I disagree with you, some bullshit reason, he disproves you, and you're like, no, actually, this time I'm right. And it's like, why are you right? I feel like I'm right. You're gonna have a debate with a person like this? You're gonna tell him, okay, you're right, shut up. I'll keep going. Did this happen in the Joe Rogan experience with Murray and Dave? No, there were no arguments being made at all about the subject. I'm just saying what the argument of like the appeal to authority that Murray used when he said like you've never been, which again, super bad taste, super inappropriate, very demeaning. There was no need to do that. Okay, there's no need to look down on a person, especially I don't think Dave is a stupid person. There's no need to look down on him. So what if he's a comedian and you're a journalist? There was no need for that. That is just very rude to do, especially in person, especially in front of a third person, right? That invited you both in good faith. Very, very fucked up, bad move, not nice. I honestly think Murray probably woke up on the worst foot of that day, and he probably should have just apologized to Dave that he was disrespectful, because it was super disrespectful. But that being said, I believe from how I saw that, I believe his point was, I cannot have a serious discussion with you about the topic when your knowledge about the topic is so superficial. We cannot go into actual details. We cannot talk about actual on the ground information that like we both know. We can't talk about intricacies. The broader fucking subject, you can talk about no problem with anyone. It's like, oh, war is good, war is bad. Oh, it sucks that kids are dying. You can talk about that with anyone. But if you have a serious debate, you go into the intricacies, into the small detail, minute detail. And I think Murray doesn't think that Dave Smith, based on how he keeps calling him a comedian and all that stuff, I believe that Murray just believes that Dave doesn't have any information to back up any arguments that would happen when it comes to like the minute details of the situation. Okay? And if you want to call it appeal to authority, go for it. Okay? I'm not even going to argue with it on that. I can see the argument of it being appeal to authority, but I feel like there needs to be some level of standard of knowledge to have a serious discussion about a subject. You can't just talk to, a professor talking to a monkey. And again, I'm exaggerating. I'm not saying Dave is a monkey. I'm not saying Murray is the professor. Okay, but a professor cannot have a serious conversation with a monkey about a serious topic. Maybe they can talk about bananas.
He went on Bill Maher's show and said, like, all these guys on Joe Rogan's show are downplaying Hitler's atrocities. That has objectively never happened.
This is the last point I was going to make. The downplaying of history. I honestly am just going to leave you with this clip with Eric Weinstein, which makes a pretty good point. I'll let Dave finish, though.
Nobody has gone on Joe Rogan's show and downplayed the Nazi atrocities. No.
I would argue that yes, they did, maybe not intentionally. And Eric Weinstein says this in the best way that I like, way better than I can.
I can essentially guarantee you that 6 million people on the nose of Jewish faith were not killed during the Holocaust. I don't know what the number was, but the odds that it would have all of those round zeros and come in exactly where it does is negligible. Every time I hear somebody make that point, I worry, right? Because the idea is it's like somebody picking at the asbestos who isn't looking like a registered asbestos removal company. There's a way in which World War II settled in a particular way, which is, thank God we didn't appease infinitely. We had an absolute monster on our hands. There were extermination camps. Genocide matters as a word. We sat with Stalin despite our obvious differences, because sometimes you have to do. There's a certain sort of story about it. It's kind of directionally true if imperfect, because it's too clean, it's too clear, et cetera, et cetera. What you see now is this mania for, hey, I found out all of these interesting facts. Did you know about the Rosenstrasse protest? What was that? Oh, where women married to half Jewish men got their men back by protesting in Rosenstrasse, showing that the Nazis could be made to relent. No, I didn't know that. So now you're in a situation in which each kind of fact, whether it's the McCullum memo or the Rosenstrasse protest, is an opportunity to pick at the asbestos. And partially, it's not really a religion. And I talked to Dave about this morning privately. There's a French philosopher, I think his name is Renan, whose great quote is, "A nation is a group of people who have agreed to forget something in common." Unfortunately, we have a very simplistic notion at the moment that because we've been lied to by these elites, and boy, is that clear over the last several years, we are now deciding that we are going to pick at everything that might be a fiction, everything that might not be exactly true. And by the way, we have a new problem with X, which was formerly Twitter, which is that you cannot walk a foot in it without being covered in anti-Semitic leeches if your last name sounds like mine. And Dave, I've understood the same thing has been happening to you. We are not finding the formula for a good life. It's not coming about by censorship. It's not coming about by false expertise. And it's not coming about by an anonymous free-for-all where everybody is sharing everything at an equal level, and we have no ability to discern what's going on. And it's not being settled through debate or combat, David.
Yeah. Basically, I want to talk about one last thing. I don't think I need to add anything. I think he was pretty clear about the asbestos. Okay, I do want to add one thing, and this is just I don't have an answer for this. I won't even try to pretend I do. It's more like a question. Is there such a thing as too much free speech? And dude, I am a free speech advocate. I like free speech. I'm just talking about in an arbitrary, a theoretical thing. Is there such a thing as too much free speech? And is it even possible to decide what is too much is, or is it better to leave it alone? I personally believe that it's better to leave it alone. However, what I do feel like there is a big problem with is not so much free speech. And this is what I don't know a real solution for. And the problem is not free speech, the problem is exposure to free speech. In some sense, people like Joe Rogan have a responsibility, or should have the responsibility, because I don't want to throw it on him oh, well, he's in this position, he has to do something. No, it's his position, it's his life, he can do whatever the fuck he wants. However, the problem is, let's say you have Joe Rogan, massive audience, right? And as Murray says, when you bring what seems to be only Palestine supporters to your cause, which, by the way, the left made a similar case where it's you only bring Trump supporters or Republicans to your thing, or practically no left, and that point has some merit. Where you have such massive exposure, do you or should you have some responsibility to try to keep the playing field as even as possible? I'm not saying 50-50, maybe even 30-70, okay? Because right now, Joe Rogan is in essence playing the part of what media was 60 years ago, okay? Where everyone would just turn on the TV and watch CNN, and they would only hear what CNN has to say, and CNN would only pick the guests that they want to pick, and then you only get a certain side of the story. If Joe Rogan has that power right now, and it is a power, should he, be more responsible with it? And I honestly, I don't know. I don't even really agree with Murray. I think there was plenty of pro-Israel or people who made good points on Israel's behalf, and plenty that went the other way. And I get it. Joe Rogan wants to bring in people he's interested in talking, who have an interesting point of view. I get that. Should he facilitate more actual debates? Maybe, right? But I'm just my question is, is the exposure of stuff like this, like podcasts. Should they have a certain responsibility? And if they should, at what point should they have it? Clearly, me, like I have one viewer, right? If I have one viewer, and if I'm lucky, I have one viewer. I don't have a responsibility, right? There's like nobody's listening, right? Then you have Jake Shields, who has like, I don't know, maybe like 1,000, 2,000 people listening to his podcast live. Should he have some responsibility? I don't think so. I think the amount is too small. But at what point is the amount big enough that you do need to have some responsibility? This is the same thing with InfoWars. When you get big enough, and what is considered big enough? How many views would be considered big enough to even consider that you have some responsibility? And if that standard is across the board on a certain number, then wouldn't that mean that also media needs to follow this standard? Right? I think exposure to information is the problem, not so much the information that is being thrown out there. Because I believe free speech, say whatever you want. In my opinion, idiots should talk as much as possible so we can all identify them and know these guys are idiots. Okay? Like some people in the comments believe that I am, and that's fine. Okay? I am an idiot. And I am using my right of free speech to talk to the void, and if you listen to this, that's cool. But should there be a limit to... Not a limit, sorry. Should there be... a standard of exposure if you're a left-leaning, let's say, podcaster? At what point should you start being, in a sense, I guess the best way to say it, which I, again, don't agree with, but like, in a sense, forced to have a quota of bringing in the opposition? And also it has to be a quality opposition, not like, you bring in like intellectual, emotionally stable left-leaning people, and then you bring, fucking schizo-psychos from the right that say like the most outlandish shit. And then it's like, well, you see, the left is the more rational one, which, by the way, I would say the right is guilty of doing it. It's just easy to do. I get it. But shouldn't there be some standard of exposure? And that's what I'll leave you with. Thank you for watching. Leave a comment down below if you agree, disagree, if you have something to say, if you have an opinion about the last topic of this video. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.